Real quick before I dive into a deeper introduction, I just want to table set a little bit. We hear about AI all the time, and almost every single time when we do, it's generally about how are we going to improve something for enterprise, or how are we going to make X more efficient, or how can we get more out of these LLMs that we're building, which is good. We need these things. The world runs on them. Businesses need to run. But I think AI has stayed so long in that corner that we're going to start to see a very fundamental shift of AI pushing further and further to end users. And so now I kind of want to get into an intro about myself and why I'm so keen on that exact topic. So currently, I am a senior director of developer relations at Slack. I help developers be successful on the platform. I find that work extremely fulfilling. Something that is very core to me, and one of my principles is like helping elevate those around you. Anytime somebody else is successful with something, I feel that I have been successful. The reason that I tie this to AI and to myself is that you can see up here, I'm also formerly incarcerated. Right? And so my journey into tech was pretty unusual. I wasn't introduced to it as a young kid sitting on my computer in my room, right? Like on AOL, hanging out in chat and doing all these things, messing with computers. At that point, I rarely ever used them. I didn't go to college and study comp sci. I didn't learn about computers through there. I was actually introduced to computers in prison when I was incarcerated. I was taking every class that was available to me, just trying to really make sure I could put myself in as good a position as I could be in when I got out. That was really my end goal. And it's where I discovered tech. It's where I discovered software engineering. It's where I discovered a lot of things, honestly, that had been limited in my life. But when I really, truly wrapped my head around, when I had that epiphany of how the internet works, what my role in that could be, and like the opportunities that this could potentially open up for me, it was literally transformational. It transformed my life. All that to say is that I firmly believe in the transformative nature and power of technology. And I see AI as like the next evolution of enabling all sorts of people who currently don't have access to tech. But we can't do it from where we are now. There's like a lot of things that fundamentally have to change to get there, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today. Where are we now, and what could a future look like that makes AI more democratized, still meets business needs, and also just makes it more accessible to the people who really might need it the most? I'm going to take a sip of water. Big intro. It's a passionate topic for me, in case you can't tell. So let's just take a look at the current state of AI right now. Public trust, aside from the business, right? Most of the reports and most of the things that we see are going to focus on businesses. I am focused on the general population, everyone else, the non-technical folks who aren't living and breathing this space, who don't know what a ChatGPT is yet today, the people who aren't concerned about storage and compute and training and all of that. They don't even understand what AI can or should be doing for them today. So that's a huge issue. Another huge issue we face in AI right now is IP theft. You really can't go a week without some sort of article or something, or a question about somebody wanting rights, access to somebody else's IP to train data. So that has broken down trust a lot, especially among experts and creators. There's also no way for those same experts and creators to start to play in the AI space today. How would me as an individual go about training models, deploying them, understanding these workloads, getting them into a system where they could be used and referenced by other people, right? There's just a huge gap. And then the last thing that we face is AI is just overly complex for an everyday user. And I want to dig a little bit more into that specifically. Like, what does it mean that AI is overly complex? Well, Let's start with where we were a couple years ago up to right now. Gen AI. Gen AI is the thing. We're going to make these large models. We're going to train them with everything. You can ask it anything you want. You get the responses back, and it's wonderful. The reality of that is that as an everyday user, just based on the law of averages, like if I take the whole internet and I put that in something and I ask a question, I'm likely to get a novel answer at best. I could get something that's pretty good, but there's probably going to be garbage included in there as well. So what that forces is I have to become skilled. I have to understand how to better talk to this model to push myself further towards the accuracy side, i.e. I'm now a prompt engineer, right? It's like a developed skill. We pay people money to do this, right? So what we're saying right now is, hey, everyday user, go be a prompt engineer and you can be successful with AI. Like, that's just not a system that people are going to, find easy and intuitive. I like to think of like Steve Jobs walking out on stage, with the turtleneck, ready to talk about the iPod, right? And this groundbreaking technology. And he whips out this device, he shows it to you, same size as the iPod, maybe even has a little turning wheel, but below it, there's just like 50 buttons, little black buttons. You're not even quite sure what they do or what they mean. And he's like, it's so easy. See, all I got to do is hit this combination of buttons and I'm playing a song. Like, whoa, it's doing exactly what I want. Hits another combination. Oh, it shuffles for me. Right? And my whole point, what I'm getting at, is it feels like there's a very big disconnect between the type of experiences users expect daily and like what we're trying to feed them with AI. And on the very last note of that, because we've said everything in AI is conversational, we've essentially created the blank canvas problem for the whole world. If you open up ChatGPT, or if you open up Claude, or if you open up any one of these other generative experiences, you are greeted with a blank text field. Sometimes you'll get a couple prompts that are there to help assist you, but really you're on your own to then go and discover this entire technology. It's just not friendly, right? There's no guiding, no hand-holding. And so in my mind, that's going to become a huge blocker to mass adoption, right? Like literally when AI is requiring you to have specialized skills to adopt it, you're immediately cutting off how much of the market you can reach. Like, can we bring AI to everyone? Not as we're doing it today. So to achieve true mass adoption, we have to start to funnel down in on a couple principles that we can really rally around to start to build better experiences, better platforms, better mental models to help bring AI further into end user space. And so really what that breaks down to is accessibility. And that's on both ends of the spectrum. Models and AI and agents need to be highly accessible to end users in a user interface that is intuitive and feels good to them. And then on the very other end, fine-tuning of models and the creation of that has to push further and further into the no-code space. Like right now, it takes entire ML, like orgs and teams to do a lot of this stuff. But we have seen a trend in models getting smaller and smaller and more specialized and more specialized. And I think that trend is going to continue for a while. And I think as it does, it will be more tailored to diverse needs, right? We have more model availability. We move away from one general model. We try to force to do things. And we explode with a bunch of models that do one thing really well. So essentially, these are all kinds of, and then last one, and honestly the most important, trustworthy. I can't believe I almost skipped this. There's just a huge lack of trust. We've fixed it a lot in enterprise, but from end user perspective, I talk to people every day and almost no one I know uses AI. If they're not in tech, they really don't use it. If they do, novel things. Oh, I asked ChatGPT for some dad jokes and I was telling them to my kids, or it picked my karaoke songs. And like, I think that's cool. Like that's actually useful and fun. But that seems like, well, novel, right? It's a very novel usage of the technology. So we need to restore trust. It's just fundamentally missing. No one knows where the data comes from that goes into these black boxes. I could put the same prompt in twice. I might get two separate results. It's not consistent. And then again, I like this creator. Why is this model able to tell me all their songs? Like, were they paid for that? And so, you know, these questions of trust really do come up. All right, so we talked a lot about it, like, oh, state of AI, not where we want it to be. But like, how do we get it to where we want it to be? And this is where I've been spending most of my time, which is trying to figure out a way where we can meet the needs of businesses, industries, meet the needs of these creators and experts who are currently not able to play in the AI space, and meet the needs of end users who are the ones who should be benefiting the most from AI technology, right? And so I think we get there through something roughly called collective intelligence. And we'll break down a little bit about what that is, but essentially it's the opposite end of the scale of general intelligence. Where Gen AI is one model, your mainframe, locked down in some room somewhere, and all interactions happen through it remotely, API-based, and you have to essentially just trust that that model will give you everything you need. I believe in a collective intelligence world, we'll actually start to see tons and tons of small specialized models be built, and they'll be put on platforms to make them accessible for other places. Hello, Hugging Face, right? Like we're already starting to see this happen. Like people know we need to do that. And it's just, you know, we've already hit developers, and it's about pushing it one step further to end users. How do we make models available to everyone? And so I think some of the characteristics of a marketplace and what we would need to see would be it houses both free and paid models. Hugging Face is already doing this. It has some sort of revenue share or payment system that allows people who have trained and put these models onto their platform to benefit, to like actually make money, generate revenue based off their own IP. It provides no code, fine model tuning tools and educational material so that me as an expert in my field in developer relations, I could go train a model. You could go train a model on everything you know on storage, doctors, climate scientists, lawyers, like the list goes on, right? So we end up with empowering experts and creators to build these models and pump them up onto these marketplaces. I mean, this isn't that familiar. It's like iPhone and the App Store, right? Like, you know, mainframe computers and handheld PCs, right? Like the natural evolution is we start with the big thing, you know, that we had to do first, and eventually it gets smaller, 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 and more distributed. And I feel like that's where we'll head. And so whoever is there first to manage that distribution, you know, is going to be in a good place. And so lastly, you have to allow access to models, right? Through some apps, some hardware, depending on what your use case is. So that's a marketplace. The second layer of collective intelligence is intelligent orchestration. If we have all of these models within a given marketplace, as an end user, there's no way I'm going to need to be able to pick which models I might use, what are the best ones, how do I even know? So we need an agent that works with like a very powerful orchestration layer to infer what you're trying to do, right? Based off whatever it is, your prompt, what's coming in, convert that not into a response through a model, but into a routing structure, right? And that would go through, you know, like route LLM or whatever you're using to route all these requests to your model. And then the orchestration layer has to take all the responses from all the different models that it's accrued from and put those together into something coherent and return that to the end user. So now I'm in a world where as an end user, I need expertise on a topic. I could pull a phone out of my pocket ask a question about starting a restaurant, and I might get a response about like menu design from a chef. I might get, something about like how to look for locations and like deals and loans from somebody like Mark Cuban if they decide to make a model. You never know. Anyone could make a model and populate it. And I think like without having some system that can analyze the content and the intent, understand what domains are available within the marketplace, a high taxonomy, right? Like all this supporting data for your weights and biases to understand where it should go. And this is very simplified. We're not going to get into all of like the follow-up learning stuff you could be doing to improve the analysis from the analyzer, from your orchestrator. But essentially, that's the goal. As an end user, I have one app, one thing I can talk to or work with, and behind the scenes, that thing can talk to all of the models that are available for me within a given marketplace. Moving on. The next step that I see as imperative is generative UX. And so, like when an application gets complex, and I'll actually take an example from real life. I work at Slack, and it's a lovely product. A lot of teams use it for communication, automation, workflow, swarming, you name it, right? But it has become a complex product, right? And it would be really amazing if like I could start to adjust some of that UI, like based on how I'm actually using that product, right? Like, oh, I send these messages all the time. Like I should recommend like make an automation for that. And here, or I've cleaned up all these channels for you and let's remove that. You don't even use this feature. Let's just not have it show up for you. Don't worry, I'll reference it to you again if I see you start doing actions that might make it useful to you. I think that's one aspect of it, but I think from the end user perspective with AI, and especially with trying to open up a world where you might have access to so many models, you can't just have a very static client, and especially not some kind of like Gen AI type assistant where it's just feeding me text back and forth. Like I might be a musician and I might be asking somebody for opinion about like how I'm producing my track. And I want to see like rich components, like my audio diffed over that audio with their explanation as to like why the mids are lower and like how you're muddy in the water. It's just a phrase I learned from going through this. I don't actually know what that means, but if you know music, don't hate me if I used it incorrectly. But the point being is that it allows you to pull in expertise using things like RAG. Could also have data sets, both from whoever trains the model, as well as whatever you upload. And this just creates like highly contextual, highly specialized interactions with these agents that give you much better results just out of the box. Like I don't have to be a prompt engineer anymore. That all goes away. Like the prompt engineer is built into the platform. Does that make sense? Like that's where we have to get. And so generative UX, it reduces cognitive load as well. I haven't even got there. I'll skip over it for time's sake. And then the last thing that we talked about, trust building mechanisms, right? So open source foundations. Hugging Face is doing a fantastic job of this. They have over 1 million models that are open source that you can start to build your own models on top of. Not all of them are great, but some of them are like really good. I've been experimenting and using them. They're fantastic. They just released one for a bunch of climate scientists, fine-tuned a model so that you can input your own climate data for wherever you are in your area and get like really, really highly accurate, real low perplexity results based off of your data that you could start to use for things like urban planning, civil engineering, like anything else that relates to like having to take climate data into account. So I think those open source foundations go a long way to building trust. You can see the model it's built on. Open source data sets for training. We can see the training data. There's no secret. We know what's going into it. And then lastly, we fine tune that model, but it's an expert or a creator doing it. And if you know who this person is, then essentially you're adopting their credibility. Like I wouldn't think that, Dr. Dre is trying to steer me wrong and putting garbage into this model, right? Like he wants this model to work well just as much as me. And so I think that when you stack that, open source models, open source data sets, credibly trained LLMs, that creates a much better system of trust. And then lastly, because the experts are training it themselves, it's their own IP. They can maintain ownership of it. And if they put it onto these marketplaces, they can then make revenue from it. And that's not something that's possible today. Like you literally just cannot do that. It's like masterclass meets Spotify meets AI. Really the easiest way to say it. Expertise on demand. And so in conclusion, right, I think if we want to get out of the world of where we are now, trapped with like a few models that we can all go and build off of, or like randomly pulling some from the internet, if we really want people's everyday experience, like if we believe AI is as transformational as we say it is literally every day, like let's transform lives with it, like get it into the hands of end users. I start thinking about things like as these models get smaller, you could build rugged hardware devices, pack them full of models that are educational, like teachers, right? Study guides, social workers, all this. Give them to prisoners who are leaving incarceration, help them with, prevent recidivism. You could package these things up and provide them to humanitarian efforts, national conservative efforts. Like the list goes essentially on and on. If we move smaller, more specialized, that eventually gets us to a point where we can start to put AI in the hands of anyone, anywhere around the world and just literally start transforming lives. So with that, AI's true potential will be realized when it's in the hands of the many, not the few.